Garmin versus Whoop, a finance perspective. Currently, the new Garmin watches come out about every 2.5 years. If you have 50 years left to live, let's say, then what this costs you is 800 for the newest watch, let's just say, multiplied by 25. This results in 20,000 euros or dollar. The Whoop costs you about 20 euros a month, and you get the newest device with the subscription, maybe also every 2 years. 50 times 12 times 20 is 12,000. It seems like this is cheaper. But this watch, for example, is refurbished. I bought it 4 years later actually, for 319 euros. I think it is reasonable to say that if you resell the device 2 years after you used it, you can get at least 1/3 of the original price back. Meaning, buying a Garmin actually has a discount of 30% built in if you just resell the watch. So the 20,000 we calculated is now multiplied by 0.66, which then factors in the 30%, which only costs us now $13,200 or euros. So if you always buy the newest, the top of the line Phoenix watch, this is the small version of the 6S, the Pro, the current is the 7S, then I would argue that it's about the same price for both. Now here is the difference though. If you buy a Whoop, you get the device, that's nice. Let's just say this is the Whoop, even though it's the Galaxy Fit 2. The Galaxy Fit 2 also has a screen, the Whoop doesn't. The main reason we actually can compare these two very different devices is because they both track HRV. They both offer similar features in terms of recovery, in terms of strain. Garmin has the body battery, training readiness, stamina, and so on and so forth, whereas Whoop has recovery and strain. Whoop is more on the side of having things very simplified. Garmin is on the side of giving you as much data as possible, still in a kind of good form. A Galaxy watch, on the other hand, I would say is also more on the side of Garmin. It is a more basic fitness tracker, even though it has very similar features to the Garmin actually. The main difference to the Garmin is the display technology and also the battery life. This lasts for at maximum a day, and this lasts for a few days. Mostly because this display is reflective, whereas this here is a display that needs to be lit by the display itself. Of course, this also has backlighting, but it only is activated once you activate it. The main problem I see with just buying a Whoop is this here. If you are anywhere close to doing normal workouts, then a Whoop is just not enough for you. You need something additional anyway. So you could, if you are on the Apple side, you could just track your workouts with Apple, and then you additionally have additional data, an additional system that tells you more data. But you still then need to import this data from Apple Health, for example, on how long you actually ran, how far you actually ran into Whoop, because Whoop itself doesn't have GPS. It also doesn't even have a display. You also obviously cannot call people. You also cannot use it to pay for something. Whoop is basically an additional band you need to wear that just gives you a few metrics, which can be very useful. But what now if you had something like the Galaxy Watch or the Sport Watch functionality of the Galaxy Watch, but just much better? This is where a Garmin really hits. With a watch like this, you can be a triathlete. These are the watches the best athletes in this world use to track their runs. Imagine you run a marathon with this here. After 2 hours, it could be dead, for example. Whereas this wouldn't be. Imagine you want to track a marathon with your Whoop. You probably wouldn't. There wouldn't be any useful case where you could do this. The only way you could do this is keep your phone with you, because your phone then has GPS and it could record the activity. The same is true for Oura Ring. These wearables are very nice for sleep tracking, for maybe recovery, and you can get very useful information. The question is just how many different wearables do you want to wear? In my case, it is the Galaxy Watch that is also a one-time purchase and comes with Samsung Health. that additionally to being now my phone on my wrist, which Garmin only offers on the Garmin Forerunner 945 that has LTE, but the newer versions and also this version doesn't have LTE, so only one version of one watch on the Garmin lineup has LTE. So this is my replacement phone, my emergency phone on my wrist. It would also be my music player if this actually worked. The Whoop, for example, also is just not a music player. Therefore, comparing these two very different devices, just because they share very similar features, if these are all the different features, then, so, let's do this again. These are all the features Garmin has. These are all the features Whoop has. Now, there is a little bit of an intersection, I would say, maybe like this. And this is the recovery, the body battery, and just very useful information from the things you're actually doing. As of currently, you cannot track strength workouts with the Whoop. There seems to be a functionality that is added according to the founder of Whoop. As of currently, whenever you cycle, you cannot track it with your Whoop. Whenever you run, you cannot really track it with your Whoop, because the main thing that determines how well you did on running is how fast you were, and you cannot track it if you don't have stats about the distance you actually ran, which you could only with having your phone with you, which is just ridiculous if phones are this big. So the reason we can compare these devices is because of this intersection in between. Now ideally, the Garmin watch would also offer the additional functionality of being your replacement phone, being your smartwatch, maybe also having Wear OS, but this is kind of cancels each other out, because Wear OS probably makes the whole process a little bit less efficient, because Garmin just can make the software specified for the watches it has. Whereas Wear OS has to be, like Android, just applicable to all the different devices that would potentially use this software. Therefore, there is probably just a trade-off in performance, which might also be the reason this watch here doesn't last very long. In total, Whoop cannot track your workouts. It only can track a few basic stats on the workouts, similar to a Galaxy Fit, for example. The Galaxy Fit, in addition, does track your steps, so it can estimate on your stride length, based on your stride length, how far you actually went. But when it comes to tracking proper workouts, like swimming outdoors, for example, or even also indoors, like running, like cycling, like hiking, like anything basically that is distance-based, the Whoop just loses because it doesn't have GPS. In addition, Garmin, for example, is just the watch you need if you go hiking. There are just so much more additional features. It has a card functionality. You can just open up a card and without LTE, without internet connection, just watch this card and navigate with this watch. It comes with a barometer, an altimeter, it comes with a temperature sensor, whereas the Whoop on the other side I think has a skin temperature sensor, which the newer Galaxy watch also has. In total, for me it now makes sense to buy a refurbished, or made sense to buy a refurbished 6S Pro as my mostly fitness tracking device, but I will still use the Galaxy watch as my replacement phone on my wrist that also has an eSIM card I actually activated, and it also allows me to kind of control my phone and potentially also control a few additional things, like my lights if I ever implement a smart home strategy that would actually allow me to automate a few more things in my home. In total, it seems compared, so if you get the newest, the best sport watch on the market, basically, I would argue that Garmin offers the best sport watches on the market, and the Phoenix line is the top of the lineup, or the Forerunner compared, so the Forerunner is the one for runners, that is a little bit lighter. And if you get the top of the lineup, basically the best sport watch on the market, you can get this for $20,000 if you upgrade every 2 years, which currently is not even happening because the last watch came out in 2019 and then 2022. So it is a 2.5-year cycle, as I just guessed based on the recent release dates. The Whoop, I don't know exactly, comes out in 2, 3 or 4 year cycles, and also is very insightful, but it just doesn't offer all of the additional functionalities a Garmin watch offers. So therefore, also because you can resell the Garmin watch and you cannot resell the Whoop because it is basically useless without a subscription. This means that this comparison, even though it then would be fairly equal with $13,000 if you resell the device for at least 30%, 33%, and the $12,000 if you live for 50 years and you upgrade basically every 2 years here, and also maybe every 2 years here, but here it doesn't matter how often you upgrade, then I would think it makes more sense to have a Garmin watch. Now, there is an additional point, which is that of course a Whoop band is a little bit less thick and so on and so forth. So what you could get is potentially the smallest or one of the smaller Garmin watches, which still has a lot of the better features, which would be the Garmin Forerunner 255, or there are even more basic versions. There are also smartwatches that are more similar to the Galaxy Watch, but you still get the Garmin ecosystem.